Brad Pritchard from the Auburn Blitz joins us for our weekly update on Auburn, and you know where we're going to start this morning, Brad. I bet with the quarterback situation. Good morning. How are you?
I had no idea.
Hey, you weren't ready for this one. Hey, let me give you a little narration on what I think. And first of all, I know Bo Nix is not a typical freshman. I mean, this kid's been probably drawing up plays since he was in the crib with his dad, Patrick Nix, former Auburn quarterback, great high school coach, and we saw what he did in high school, setting records in the state of Alabama. I mean, he's special, clearly, to win this job. Having said that, I'm still a little surprised. I just thought that for me, from the outside looking in, the safe play was to go with Gatewood. You're going to play them both anyway. At least that's what Guess Mazan said. You start the redshirt freshman who's been in your program for a year, and then you have the option of bringing Nix off the bench. Now, if Nix gets out there and tears it up, it's a moot point. But if he struggles as a true freshman, I think you open yourself up to clearly to criticism and also second guessing, and maybe you hurt his confidence. So I just thought it would be a better play to go with Gatewood. You've got Nix available as the true freshman. Gatewood's invested a year in the program. Now he suddenly learns he's a backup. What did you think of the decision?
Well, I thought, first of all, that, this has been a battle for a long time that's been coming. And one of the things that you look at throughout this whole process is I think it was very, very much evaluated down to the smallest detail. You look at both of these guys, and what we've talked about on our show is that the positive out of this thing is it's made them both better. And I think Coach Malzahn alluded to that. You're right. I'll go back to something you just said a minute ago. Bo Nix is not a typical freshman. He's been down in Auburn since January, so he's about to enter his 9th month on campus. So things are just so much different in today's world of college football these days. And you get guys that come in. I mean, you look at Alabama and how successful they've been over the past decade and how many true freshmen Nick Saban has run out on the field and been major contributors to a lot of those great teams. So Bo Nix, from a mental standpoint and a physical standpoint, does not look like a freshman. We knew it was going to be a tough battle. I told you numerous times on here, and all of the people that I associate with down here felt like Joey Gatewood going into the fall had an edge. We really did. Size-wise, maybe from an opportunity to know the offense a little bit better. But the one thing it was going to come down to was, can Joey Gatewood make the intermediate passes? Can he be good enough in the passing game? We know he's good enough running. I mean, a big physical kid, looks like Cam Newton, drew those comparisons, which I think maybe was unfair to him for the most part because there's not very many Cam Newtons that come through. But it was going to come down to who was able to move the ball through the air, and it just appeared that Bo Nix has been a better passer right out of the gate when you're comparing the two. And Bo Nix, somewhere along the line, has and we talk about it on our show all the time, people have somehow needled him into the fact that he can't run the football, and I don't know where that comes from, but he's a big kid. Maybe he's not your prototypical runner, but he was the number one dual threat quarterback for a reason. He can run the ball. He's pretty fast, and he's put on a lot of weight. He's up around 215, 220 pounds now as a guy that can take some of those shots in the SEC. Now, in high school, he didn't have to run the ball a lot because the offense was designed and the receivers he had at Pinson Valley was predicated to him just stepping back and delivering the ball quickly and letting those guys make plays. And it's one of the reasons he set the state passing record here, for yardage. But you go back, and he's a dual-threat quarterback. He can run this offense. If he needs to run the ball 15, 16 times a game, he will. So that's something that defenses are going to have to respect with him. But they're definitely going to have to respect his accuracy throwing the football, and I think that's what ultimately ended up winning the job for both.
Brad Pritchard with us from the Auburn Blitz talking Auburn football. All right, I want to ask you about Gatewood because, listen, man, ego's involved in this game, particularly at the quarterback position. I mean, here's a guy who had been in the program a year, had heard the comparisons to Cam Newton that you mentioned. I think most of us coming out of spring figured he would probably be the game one starter. It doesn't happen. Now he's backing up a kid that, even though they're in the same class, is straight out of high school. How is he handling this? What are you hearing on Gatewood's psyche? Is he all in with it?
Well, first of all, it's tough when you're a competitor. You know that, Gary. I mean, you don't want to lose anything to anybody, and you don't want to lose the opportunity to be the starter when you've been around the program now going on a couple of years. And, that's part of it, though. That's competition. I think he's handled it extremely well. From everybody I've talked to, and you heard Bo Nix was asked that question in that press conference right after Bo Nix was named QB1. Said Joey's handling it about as good as anybody would handle it. He said he's a great quarterback. He's a competitor. And I told you all along, I don't think this was a situation where Auburn was sitting there going, man, we got a quarterback race down here because we don't have a quarterback. We're just trying to figure out which one's going to step up. I think Auburn had a quarterback race because they had two really good quarterbacks, and one had to emerge. You have to establish somebody for some chemistry and some consistency, and to start getting the majority of the snaps with the ones and start building that continuity, because you got a game coming up next Saturday. And so that was a situation that most coaches, the sooner the better on naming a guy that can be the leader of the team, and your quarterback's the leader of the team. So it's definitely not a cut on Joey. There's a lot of people in this country that lose a job to Bo Nix. And as Coach Malzahn said, it's not like Joey Gatewood's going to be standing over there holding the clipboard. He's going to play a good bit. And I told you a few weeks ago, I expect whichever one that was going to be named, there's going to be for the first 3 or 4 weeks, because of the redshirt rule, you're going to see both of them play a lot. Mm-hmm. And there's really no reason for them not to, unless something is just really rolling and clicking, and you don't want to break up that continuity and that chemistry. But Joey Gatewood's got a role on this team, and I truly believe that from hearing what Coach Malzahn talked about. And in this day and age, it seems like the backup quarterback has become more of a hot commodity now, Gary, than the starter, because all of these guys are moving around so much in college football. And I mean, the crazy thing, Georgia's had 2 quarterbacks transfer in the last couple of years. One's at Washington, one's now at Ohio State. Both of them are starting. I mean, you look at Clemson, they had a starter transfer. Alabama had a starter that's now going to be the starter for Oklahoma, who just had 2 Heisman Trophy winners in a row. I mean, this is just a new day and age of college football, and after 4 weeks, if Joey Gatewood feels like, man, I'm not going to have a shot to be a starter here, and this is not going to be my team, I want to go and see if I can find a place that I can fit in to be a leader and be a quarterback. Who's going to blame him? That's just kind of how it is now. So he's a competitor. Don't expect him to stand over there if he decided to do that. But you know what? He may decide to stick this thing out and be a player at Auburn for the rest of his career. We'll just have to wait and let time tell that.
Well, the bottom line now is it's time to get ready to play Oregon next Saturday night in Arlington, Texas. I think it's the premier game of the opening weekend. But I was thinking this morning, Brett, when I was kind of going over my head this interview with you, and I thought, for Auburn fans, this is going to be huge. It's going to set the momentum for the season. But we've discussed this many times. Auburn is a difficult team to gauge, and last year you won that opening game against Washington, and looked like it was going to vault Auburn to a potential championship season. It didn't turn out that way. 2 years ago, you lost, I think, the second game of the season at Clemson, and came back and played in the SEC championship game. So it is just one game. It is the opening game, and I know fans sometimes don't get it, but I'm sure from the football coach's perspective, they want to win it. At the same time, win or lose, the season will still be in front of Auburn either way.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, but going into this season, knowing this is a tough schedule, and you have an opportunity to open up the season on national TV, as you said, as the premier game, I think Auburn not only needs to go out there and win the game, I think they need to win it convincingly. I think I told you that last week. We just feel that way. I mean, you look at how Alabama's opened up the season against tough non-conference opponents like a Wisconsin, a USC, a Florida State, a Clemson in the past. Alabama don't just show up and try to win. They expect to dominate. And I think you have to get that way if you want to be a national contender. If you want to contend in this conference, you got to send a message. And I'm not cutting Oregon. Oregon's got a great football team. I mean, obviously, you can look at their ranking. They got an outstanding quarterback coming back, maybe the top quarterback in the country by some indications and some predictors. But Auburn may have the best defensive line in the country. Danny Sheridan seems to think so, and that doesn't happen very often for Danny Sheridan to think Auburn has the best anything. But he actually thinks Auburn's going to win 10-plus games this year, and he feels like the reason why is because of that defensive line. So I think if you let Justin Herbert sit back there and survey the field, it's going to be a long day for you. But I think this defensive front and these linebackers are really physical and they're fast. And I think they need to show that there is still a discrepancy between the Pac-12 and the SEC. So, of course, you'll take a win. You take a 3-2 win. We hope we don't ever see that again, like we did several years ago against Mississippi State. But you need to come out and you need to play good football out of the gate, and you need to show the country that you belong up there in the talk of that. But like you said, win, lose, or draw, the season's going to go on. But it sure is a lot better to build off of a win rather than dig yourself out of a 0-1 start.
All right, these week 0 games, not many of them. Of course, we got Sanford. I want to remind folks Sanford plays tomorrow in Montgomery against Youngstown State at 3 p.m. at the Crampton Bowl, so make a note of that. But the big one, of course, and got Arizona and Hawaii, but the big one is Florida. I think we've also got, Villanova and Colgate tomorrow. But the big one is Florida and Miami tomorrow night in Orlando. Who you like there?
I'm sorry, Gary, you broke up a little bit.
Florida versus Miami tomorrow night in Orlando. Who you like?
Florida versus Miami. I like Florida. I really do. I've been high on Florida in the off season. I think Dan Mullen's a good coach. I think they've had quarterback problems down there, and Dan Mullen's had a history of being able to get quarterbacks to play extremely well. So I think Florida will open up the season. I think Miami, though, you got to like the way they've kind of changed the culture down there, and Manny Diaz, as far as the head coach and what he's instilling and trying to bring back a physical nature to Miami football. I think it's going to be a good game, but I think Florida's going to end up pulling it out. I've got Florida really kind of challenging there in the East this year. Now, I think Dan Mullen is bringing that edge back to Florida that they haven't had in a few years, and I'm looking forward to the game. But I think Florida does win it.
Finally, Jim Harbaugh at it again. There's a new book coming out, and some snippets are getting out. The author's been on some radio shows, and Harbaugh casting shade at the SEC, saying it's hard to compete. It's hard to beat the cheaters. And I think the guy's a good football coach, but to me, this just reeks of what, I haven't done what I said I was going to do at Michigan yet. I want to make it clear to everybody that there's a reason. Because I do it right, and we're the beacon of integrity, and I think most coaches in the SEC deal with it too. But most of the time, what they do, they shut up and they coach, and they don't make any excuses. And when if they lose their job, they don't stand up and say, "Well, I lost my job because I was competing against cheaters." You just got to go out and you got to coach and you got to play. And this guy does, I think, get under a lot of people's skin, particularly in the southeastern portion of the United States, because he's just always making excuses as to why his program isn't where the fan base wants it to be. What's your take on this guy?
I had a feeling you were going to ask me about this, and I read the article, and it's nothing but a pure deflection, as you said, of something that he hasn't been able to accomplish. I would first start by replying to him by saying, how about win your conference first? How about beat your arch rival? Don't worry about what's going on in the SEC and coaches down here when you can't beat the team that basically is the benchmark for your own conference. You spend a lot of money on recruiting. I looked at the numbers. Ohio State didn't spend near as much money as Michigan did in recruiting and still out-recruited. Maybe that says something about you and your program. He's a flamboyant guy that climbs trees and recruits backyards and tries to get as many stories written about him as possible. He takes them on world tours to try to expose the brand, which, hey, look, in this day and age, you applaud somebody for doing whatever they got to do. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is wins and losses and results. And right now, Jim Harbaugh, I think by most factors, would be considered a failure as the head coach at Michigan. And he knows it, and he knows the pressure's on, and he hasn't performed yet. He's had one pretty good season since he's been there, and the rest have been average at best. So when you feel the heat and when you feel like you haven't done what you need to do to be successful, you tend to deflect. So the best thing for him to do is to point a finger and call the SEC a bunch of cheaters, which makes him look worse, in my opinion, and makes him look like a whiner and a little child. So I think he needs to start by just concentrating on winning his own conference and then worrying about the SEC later. Because, look, I'd get that statement maybe. Let me just put that out there. If he was winning the Big Ten every year and going to the playoffs, and he's been to the playoffs 2 or 3 years in a row, and the likes of Alabama or Georgia or whoever had beaten them by 20 or 30 points those years, and he comes out and says, look, man, we're getting to the playoffs every year, but we can't compete with those guys down there because they do this. But he really has no room to say anything because he ain't even made the playoffs yet. So I think he needs to just concentrate on trying to win games in his conference and trying to win the conference championship before he worries about what's going on down here in the SEC.
Great stuff. Enjoyed it as always, Brett. Of course, this time next Friday, I'll ask you to make your prediction on Auburn and Oregon. All right, let the listeners in on different ways they can hear you and see you.
Thank you, Gary. Down here in Central Alabama, it's 105.1, the Lake FM, and soon to be on another station in Auburn called 100.3. Looking forward to that. Also on Facebook Live every single day. You can go to the Sportz Blitz page. That's sports with a Z. And Auburn Blitz every day from noon to 1, Monday through Friday.
Thank you so much.